The topics and opinions expressed in the following show are solely those of the host and their guests and not those of W4CY Radio, its employees, or affiliates. We make no recommendations or endorsements for radio show programs, services, or products mentioned on air or on our web. No liability, explicit or implied, shall be extended to W4CY Radio or its employees or affiliates. Any questions or comments should be directed to those show hosts. Thank you for choosing W4CY Radio.
Welcome to the Ask Good Questions podcast, broadcasting live every Wednesday, 6 p.m. Eastern Time on W4CY Radio at W4CY.com. This week and every week, we will reach for a higher purpose in money and life, as well as a focus on health and wellness. Now, let's join your host, Bonita Bell-Andersen, as together we start with Asking Good Questions.
Hello, this is Bonita Bell-Andersen, and thank you so much for joining us on the Ask Good Questions podcast. We have a phenomenal show today that will be important for everyone that's listening, especially those that have not started saving yet. So what I'd like to do is invite my guest, Paul Adams, to the proverbial podcast stage.
Hello, hello.
Hello, hello. Paul and I go way back to the dim past. We were both working in the financial advising world, and I don't even remember how we came across each other. But anyway, we did. Both of us in Washington State at the time. Paul, you're still in Washington State. I'm going to tell them a little bit about you, and then you can fill them in a little bit more. He is the founder and CEO of Sound Financial Group and host of the More Than Commas podcast. We're going to talk about that a little bit more later. He's a seasoned financial educator. I've always respected Paul. He's been someone that I know helps successful individuals and families make evidence-based decisions. We're going to talk about that, about money, while avoiding the cultural traps of lifestyle-driven spending. So his firm is built on the philosophy of dimensional fund advisors, which me as well. We have different paths as far as where we went with our financial advising business, but tell us just a little bit more about you and your life.
Well, I think one thing that's unique as we talk about the financial firm that really is different about us is, one, we went location independent back in 2017, which will lead a little bit in my personal life here in a moment. And then we also chose to be more like a design build architect, where anybody who engages with us pays a fee to retain us for our knowledge and our design abilities. And then they get a separate choice if they want to implement with us, or maybe they want to implement with their nephew that got into the industry 6 months ago. And we are able to work with them without them having concern that our recommendations are going to be affected by the products, because we don't care if they buy the products from our firm and have us be the general contractor that builds the building, or are they going to go do that somewhere else or themselves, which we support. Mm-hmm. But we went and became location independent because my family and I love camping. We have, in 2017 through 2022, we spent on average 82 nights a year inside in our RV traveling the country.
Oh, and good for you.
And as an advisor, I realized that I still wanted to serve my clients, not just be lights out the whole time. So I designed a way we could have the business where it doesn't matter where our client is or where we are. Yeah. We meet you where you are.
Well, which is kind of, you and I have had different paths, but in some ways very similar, because I'm in Hawaii right now.
Yeah.
Serving the senior mission with my husband. Mm-hmm. But I can still do my podcast, and I'm still, involved with my firm and keeping track on what's going on. So, yeah. So tell us a little bit about your family.
So married now for going on this year will be 18 years. We have three great kids that by the end of this year, they'll be 13, 14, 15.
Oh boy.
And yeah, they're all born in 30 months. That is, to translate that for anybody listening, that is 5 years without a break from diapers. Everybody's still in diapers at some point over 5 years. And, but on a fun life front, and as I've listened to some of your shows, it definitely takes a holistic approach to life, not just money. So I thought you might appreciate this. My son got his driver's permit, but the way it works here is you kind of got to get registered for a course, and there's several steps. Well, he didn't know they were all completed. So when we went to church on Sunday, I'm clearing some things out of my passenger seat where he normally sits because he likes to ride with me. And I got it all cleared out, and I handed him a piece of paper, and I said, hold on to this. You're going to need it. Finished clearing out the seat and put it all in the back seat. He's like, what is this thing? And I handed him the keys and said, it's your learner's permit. So get in the car, as I got in the passenger seat. And just taking away any of the anxiety, any of the, I'm going to be driving on the road. It was just like, no, you run a lot of equipment. You drive the side by side around the property all the time. You're fine. We're going to go just to the gas station on the way to church. I'm only going to have you drive to the gas station. And he did it. And it was like that moment where you've got to introduce your children to a new level of performance in some way, and being able to do so in a way that doesn't trigger any of that like build up. And they just realize that most things that are new that you do are just not that hard to do, that most of the difficulty is the stories we tell ourselves or the narratives leading up to it.
Mm-hmm. I'm with you. I've got grandchildren, Paul, that are getting their driver's permits.
23 of them, right?
23 of them, yes. Who would have thought? So, yeah, so there's several of them, and they're like, Grandma, I've got my driver's permit. And there's already been a couple of accidents, like whoopsies. And so, but yeah, so it's a new level of responsibility too. So, yeah. Anyway, but that's a whole nother topic. Today, we're going to talk about why people are not saving the way they should be. But before we get into our discussion, I have some statistics. Most of this is from the Federal Reserve, I was like, I didn't know the Federal Reserve did studies, but they have. So this is key statistics on the U.S. retirement savings, right? 25% of Americans have no retirement savings at all. 31% feel very confident they'll have enough to retire comfortably. That means that a whole 69% don't feel confident. The median retirement savings for Americans aged 55 to 64 is only $134,000. And there was a little comment on that. That amount would generate about $500 a month in retirement, assuming a 4% withdrawal rate. So, however, but by age group, like I have my under 35 clients, I am proud of, because of course I've also been going, come on, let's start savings. But the average under 35 only has about $11,000 saved. And then it gradually goes up to the 65 to 74-year-olds that only have $164,000. So the statistic goes into why 40% of workers aren't even enrolled in a retirement plan. Average 401k balance is only about $112,572. 45% of baby boomers have no retirement savings whatsoever. 34% of Gen Xers say retirement isn't even on their radar yet. And the biggest thing that has upset me, but in the end, I can't do anything about it. I've tried. But a lot of Americans will take money out of their 401ks because of something that's going on in life.
Over
and about
50% of the time they get cashed out.
Yeah, I know. And it's like, oh man, you need this. But they take those early withdrawals, incurring taxes and penalties. And, it's just, I just hate it when that happens. Why are they doing this? They're living paycheck to paycheck. They're increasing spending instead of saving money when they get a raise. And they also said lack of access to retirement plans. Seems like that shouldn't be the case, but
I call bologna sandwich.
Yeah.
on the inability to access.
Yeah. Yeah. But what they're saying is especially prevalent among part-time, gig, and self-employed workers. So, yeah, I've got a very talented nephew who's a sign painter. He's never worked. He's been his own boss his whole life, but has he saved? Not really. Not really.
Nope.
So, with those statistics in mind, let's start with the obvious. Why don't we? Why don't people save for retirement? When they know they should, right?
Yeah, and I think it's a multifold thing. If we think about it in current terms, we have all kinds of very productive feedback loops in our life. Like when I was a little kid, if I poured myself a cup of coffee, then I poured too long, I'm going to burn my hand. And I learned like, oh, that's a pretty quick, 8, 12-second feedback loop. And then, if you're listening and you're not a regular drinker and you have 3 glasses of wine tonight, you're going to feel that tomorrow morning.
Yeah.
If you talk too harshly or harshly at all to your spouse, you may quickly find out like all these things like bad. If I eat too much food, I start gaining. I don't know why. I somehow get a free pass for 8 days, but by day 10, I gain 10 pounds. So that's a pretty good feedback loop. And that's the relatively short timeline for all the feedback loops in our life, except money.
Yeah.
Because money, not being a good steward of it, feels basically amazing for decades. Because look at all the Instagram stuff I've got going, and I showed off my new whatever, and look at the trip that we went on, and all of that stuff. It feels great. Now, what is different and what none of us have really adapted to yet is we used to have the virtue among the industrious of frugality. And when I say by industrious, it's people that were able to entrepreneur themselves into an opportunity. They built a ranch or they opened a bar or a local newspaper, etc. They were building, our country early on.
Yeah.
And these people building our country, if they had means and wealth, it just happened to be that everybody could see it. We would know Bonnie owns the bank. We would know I have 10,000 head of cattle. We could have all that. So we could walk around and hold as a virtue that we restrained ourselves in what we would consume. And it made sense because nobody questioned whether or not Paul Adams was a success because of my 10,000 head of cattle.
Could see it.
You could see it. But now that same Paul Adams drives, because I don't care about this stuff, I drive a 2015 Ford Explorer that I have absolutely done tremendous damage to, dragging it behind my RV across the country, and I don't care. But a lot of people do. In fact, for many people, it's like an addiction. And it's because we have this biological urge that, like a peacock shaking its tail feathers, in impressing the community of males and females around us. It's just deep. We're still got biology. And so we're going to want to buy the car, buy the house that is quote unquote commiserate with our lifestyle. But we live inside a society where commiserate with our lifestyle means spending 105% of your income,
right,
where what we have to do to be financially successful is save 20% of gross.
Yeah.
And that has you have to live a very, very different lifestyle than all of your compatriots who make a similar level of income that aren't doing it. And they aren't. Like, on average, statistically, if you're somebody who's saving, everybody you care about around you is probably not. And that's just because most people aren't setting aside an appropriate amount of money and are making decisions based upon how their life looks today. Now, another thing that's developed, if we think about even a middle-class lifestyle today, that person has access to better things in lifestyle than somebody who lived the richest in the world 200 years ago.
No kidding.
And we but how much money would that person be saving if they just lived the same lifestyle they lived 200 years ago? they'd be saving 90% of their income.
Yeah.
But we've all continued to level up our lifestyle. And instead of reflecting, what do I want my life to look like? What we do is we decide what our life should look like is that over there.
Yeah.
And at my church, I lead a Saturday men's group that's 2 times a month. And I told them I'm designing this workshop. We're about to get the last session of this 8-week course that I taught to just men at my church about how to look differently at their careers and in implementing some business practices I've used to build this business. And one of the things that I shared with them is I shared with them how much I make a year. And they were all like, what? And the only reason I shared that with them is I said, you guys, I have built this incredible white collar business so that I can walk into a room and people think I'm there to fix the audio or shoe a horse. Like nobody thinks I'm there to be the financial mind in the room. And I'm perfectly fine with that being my lifestyle. Sometimes that's really important in identity to people, et cetera. I just set that aside because I'm anchored in the life that I'm creating, not in the life anybody else sees. And so when it comes to people planning for money, one of the first things they haven't done is any work in cultivating contentment to say, this is what I would like to see my life be like. And then as your income goes above it, you're able to hold because you built the life you like. And now what the game you're playing is to make the life you like permanent.
Yeah. And
then I'm going to go a little philosophical, just one moment more. In that when people are working their way toward retirement, they're carrying a debt. Now, they don't think this way, but they're carrying a debt that they owe to, say, 65-year-old them. Now, that debt is the net present value of income for the rest of your life. However, you and your advisor calculate that. And when you roll up to that birthday, do you have enough money to pay that person? And some huge amount, like 95% of America won't. And they're just going to keep working.
I've joked about how I've had people come into my office looking like a deer in the headlights because they're 60 years old and, oh crap, I've never done anything. And it's like,
yes.
And I think both you and I are like, whatever we could do to make people not do that, be there.
Yeah. Yep. Because what they're not thinking about is when you're funding your lifestyle, you're always funding two until the point at which you reach financial independence. Is you have to fund your current lifestyle, and then you have to fund your lifestyle for the period of life when no one's going to value your offer.
Yeah.
Like just at some point, as I get more and more gray hair in my beard, it creates different conversations than were created before. And 20 years from now, there'll be even more different conversations about age and health and what I want to be able to do. And what I want to be able to do is be as securely stable to be able to end that on my terms with the level of lifestyle I want for the rest of my life. And we want that for all of our clients.
Right. You made me, when you were talking about the horseshoer, I have literally, my oldest daughter's a vet, and we spend the summers on her farm in the Tri-Cities. And I was one day holding a horse while the farrier was there shoeing, and he's asking me, he finds out I'm a financial advisor, and he's asking me financial questions. And I'm looking at him and I'm looking at his old truck, and I'm like, I don't want to make assumptions, but I'm betting that he's probably hand to mouth, but he's just, so let me ask you the next thing. There's something that you've said in the past, and that is retirement isn't a math problem. It's a narrative problem. So what the heck does that mean?
Well, okay. I'm going to go deep here, and I hope the audience doesn't mind the dive. You see, I would assert that you cannot hear anything I'm saying, Bonita. You can't hear a thing I'm saying. And nobody in the audience listening to me right now can hear anything that I'm saying, ever. And you and everybody in the audience, none of us, including me, ever hear what anybody ever says. Okay. Now, that little voice in everybody's head that said, I don't know what Paul's talking about. I can totally hear him right now. Okay. That's actually the only voice any of us ever hear. You see, that little, the way I draw a picture of it sometimes is imagine like a little tiny stick figure in your ear, or like maybe some cute dwarf from a movie, but they're just real small and they listen to the world. Okay. And then they tell you what was said. But that little thing we'll just call your listening, that listening is influenced by your past, your traumas, your dreams for the future, your wishes, wants, and preferences. Like if you've ever had a conversation with your spouse where it's like you said one thing and they heard something else and there's some kind of friction or upset, you're like, wait, what happened? And they just didn't understand what you said. That's because their listening didn't translate what you intended to say. Well, we listen our entire environment. Every advertising, commercial, narrative set around us, etc. Like how many people have you heard say one of the biggest falsehoods about money that I remember being said around my kitchen table, like regular, is, you know what, it's probably just going to be cheaper to get a new car than fix that one. Bologna sandwich. Almost never is that the case, unless you bought some, Porsche or something like that, super expensive to fix. But otherwise, like normal cars, if you maintain the car properly, it's a whole different world.
Yeah.
But the narrative is, oh, it's cheaper to just get a new one. And you wouldn't believe that when somebody holds that just to say, hey, I support you. You've got enough money. You can do it either way you want. But let me just walk you through the math of what keeping your current car is. And you can feel the emotional bit of it for people when I just even bring it up.
Yeah.
And then you can never have anybody around you give you appropriate financial feedback when you make a bad decision. And I'll give an example. One very, very close friend of mine went down to Southern California to visit him. And, my family and I have had this living radically within our means mindset for quite some time. And I go down to Southern California, it picks me up in a brand new, like $60,000 build out of, I think it was a Toyota Tundra. And I'm like, what's with the new car? I mean, weren't we just talking in a meeting a couple of weeks ago about how great the philosophy is? And it was like, well, yeah, but I'm going to keep it 10 years. And I said, well, but if you look at the time value of money, and then I could tell the tone change. Like I was stepping near the third rail in a very good relationship. And so what we unintentionally create is people around us can't even give us appropriate feedback, because once you buy that car with that big loan or that cruddy lease or whatever it is, you can't undo it. And the people around you who love you, who have enough compassion for you, don't beat you over the head about that being a terrible decision. And so people have a hard time learning. And now on top of that, everybody that makes us an offer, almost nobody in our life has an interest in us accumulating wealth. They just have an interest in us buying the next bigger house, a different mortgage, or this financial product or that financial product. And so all of those things disrupt people's ability, that those narratives, that what you might refer to as cultural common sense. And then people don't learn basic money mechanics. Like every client fills out an application. We don't make an offer to a client in the first meeting. We just share our philosophy. Then if they want to, they can fill out an application. We set a different meeting to review that for them because we don't work with every client. We charge a fee up front. So we don't want to offer a fee if we can't bring enough value. So that's why this application. But on the application, there's a question, Bonita, and it says, do you know how much capital at work will be required for you to have financial independence? Okay. Now, these are the people we work with on average are between like $250,000 and $2 million a year of income. So these are not unsophisticated people. what percentage of them do you think have a number?
I'm betting they don't.
Yeah, only 5% have a
5%.
number. And not all of them are well thought out.
Yeah.
But think this is the biggest narrative break, which narrative break would be a conversation somebody's not having. And the conversation people aren't having is even an awareness of where they're trying to get to. Because if you don't, everybody, when they started working their first job at some point had a tough day and say, at least I get to retire one day. And we got out of bed every day. We went to work 40 hours a week, maybe worked multiple jobs. We got ourselves educated. We built a career. We did. And all along the way, we know we're headed to retirement, we say, but we don't even have it on a map.
No.
We don't have like here's a number to shoot for. And because we haven't taught something as simple as that 4% distribution rule as like a prerequisite,
right?
Just simple math. It should be just in high school math.
Well, how do you think our culture rewards spending instead of savings?
Well, if you've been on social media, ever, it's because it's just look at the posts that get the greatest amount of likes. They're going to be the cool vacations. They're going to be the cool new car, the cool new piece of equipment, etc. Mm-hmm. Like there's a very specific reason why all of my social media posts are business related, because I don't want encouragement from people who I don't know to make decisions that they enjoyed pictures of me doing, which probably meant it was expensive. So I just don't post hardly at all to social media. And I've taken out that particular feedback loop that would encourage something like consumption.
Right. Well, so where do you think money's going? I'm guessing we've already talked about it. Money's going to bigger, better lifestyles. Let me ask you this.
I think there's something hidden in it, though.
Okay, all right. But I'm feeling like, don't you think too that it's part of it is just people wanting to look good? It's just a real behavior.
Yeah. Have you read Morgan Housel's book, The Philosophy of Money? Psychology of Money, sorry.
No, I haven't read that one. I'll have to go look it up.
It is a great book. That is my two favorite financial books. If you don't count any of them that I wrote, are Stop Acting Rich by Dr. Thomas Stanley, and then The Psychology of Money. But in one of the things they talk about in that book is it is about looking good. But here's what I would have everybody think about. Because there is a certain amount of public identity, like I probably shouldn't drive a 1973 Pinto. There is probably a rust bucket standard I should keep safe. I shouldn't drive a car that looks unsafe, because then that falls into people's judgment of my judgment. So I don't want that.
Right.
But aside from people spending it that way, what they're doing is it's getting crowded out, not just on looking good, but then the maintaining of those things.
Yes.
Right. Like you get the cooler looking car, they charge more per labor to work on that cool import car.
Yep.
And so they'll make one decision up front, but then they'll make other decisions that have maintenance. And like we have a client that bought a $2 million home in Florida. They live on the other side of the country. And that inflation that's normal, the mortgage is pretty pricey because he got it after rates went up. But you wouldn't believe how much the maintenance has gone up on it. Mm-hmm. And it's just on the balance sheet. So you can't say, I'm not going to maintain a $2 million asset. What do? Lower your retirement plan contribution.
Yeah.
And so it could look like savings will start to get crowded.
Yeah. The role of identity, I think, is huge. Can we craft? So I'm just thinking what we need to do is encourage people to craft an identity that says I'm going to save, right? I mean, it's a paradigm shift, isn't it?
Yeah, it's like, well, when you think of a narrative, a movie is a script. And so we're just running script in our head. You had a past guest that talked about, changing people's programming. And I think with money, it's very much the same in that if what I realize is I have a strategy to reach financial independence. Number one, I don't think people should call it retirement, because if we go back again to the early 1900s, or even in the founding of our country, there's not a single business or, spiritual leader in this country who ever, quote unquote, retired. It might have changed avocation. It wasn't till 1935 with the advent of Social Security, we started applying retirement to people. Before that, it meant like, I'm going to retire to the den for the evening with my scotch. I'm going to retire this old plow. We're going to retire this old horse. That was usually not good for the horse. But they would they would retire things. It wasn't anything you did to a person. And then we started saying we retire. But think about this for a moment. I mean, I think it speaks so well to your continued involvement with your planning, with the planning firm and with this podcast, is there's no biblical basis for retirement. I don't know that there's even a faith that's existed for over 500 years on this planet that says you get old and are useless. But that's
I've actually had people do that to me. I've had people say, "Well, aren't you retired?" It's like, I don't want to retire. I don't want. I mean, in my mind, it's like sitting on a deck, rocking in a rocking chair, and declining. No.
Well, this is what you can do that changes up the narrative for you and start, for lack of a better way of saying it, we're going to inoculate them against bad narratives. And one thing you say is like, no, I'm not retired. I'm financially independent. There's a big difference. Think about the conversation you get to have with somebody after you say that. Or if somebody's trying to convince us to buy a car that we can't buy, never say, I can't afford it. Never say that. Because the second I say I can't afford it, I'm deciding to play by their rules. Instead, I'm going to say, oh man, that car is beautiful. Unfortunately, it would break strategy for us. Now, if I say it's going to break strategy for me, what's the next thing the salesman has to say?
You're going to go, what?
He's going to say, what strategy? It happens all the time. And I go, oh, let me show you. And then it's like, I'm running the lines on the field for how this game is going to be played. I don't have to enter into their language at all because I'm just not going to break strategy. Your friends say, I want to go to Hawaii. I'd love to go to Hawaii, but it's going to break strategy for me. Well, what do you mean your strategy? Well, my strategy is save 20% of my gross income every year because I want to have the choice to be financially independent on my terms, not be financially independent because the workforce ground me into it.
Right.
And then that changes even the relationship with your friend when you come forward with a strong narrative, because that's where leadership, I think, happens.
Yeah.
Is our people more encouraged and ambitious about the future based upon what we said or what they were thinking when we first showed up in their life? And I think that even the listeners, if you change somebody's language, it's not, I can't afford it. It's that I won't break strategy, right? It's not that I'm retired. It's that I'm financially independent and now I'm doing what I want. Doesn't mean I'm not busy.
That's for sure. So let's talk about this whole thing with lifestyle inflation. Somebody gets a raise and up goes the spending. How do you inoculate somebody against lifestyle inflation?
Well, what they have to do first is cultivate contentment. See, most people are living the life that they have now, not by any design, but by default, because it's what they could afford to. And by the way, most people never even pause long enough with their spouse to say, hey, what would we like just our regular lifestyle look like? Like, do we like, like as an example, maybe they've both been talking about redoing the floors and they've both been talking about it because they thought the other one wanted it. And it's like, no, we don't care about the floors. Well, save $20,000. Great. Like, but that's it. So we just got to get on the same page about what we want our life and lifestyle to look like currently. And then how do we get as close to that while reserving for our old age? I would contend, I'm happy to be challenged, put it in the comments. Bonnie will point people over to me. But what I would challenge is 20% of gross is the minimum amount somebody should be saving.
Yeah.
And And there's just a lot of life that you got to say no to. One of my biggest mentors was helping a woman with some estate planning. She was unfortunately dying of pancreatic cancer out in Huntington Beach. And he was about 35 at the time, about 10 years younger than I am now. And he said to the woman, he said, how did you manage to accumulate $90 million? You know, she had a good business and stuff like that, but I mean, she just kept buying real estate. And even in her early years when she wasn't making that much money, he said, how'd you do it? She says, this was 2000 or 2005. And she said, you know, honey, when I was your age, we just didn't have as much to say no to. And now we have to say no to so much. Like back in when she was starting out, like here's the thing, my mom, and she was born in 1945 in Nebraska and did not have indoor plumbing until she was 10. They had an outhouse.
Yeah.
Now, that is like, if you pause and cultivate contentment, like what would my lifestyle, what would this errand I'm running look like 100 years ago, 150 years ago, and put you in a position to realize how incredibly wealthy we are in the history of mankind on this planet, like unbelievably wealthy.
Yes.
And then that kind of gives you some inoculation from that next advertisement for the cool newer car. In fact, anything you might consider doing on payments, what I want you to do is take your net income for the month for you and your spouse, divide it by the amount of hours that you guys each have to work, and then realize how many hours per month you've got to put in just to pay that bill.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a lot. And people aren't present to that. And it's that idea of getting yourself out of the narrative enough to just do some math, have your aims, have some standards, like I'm going to set aside 20%. And it doesn't matter if it's 401k or anything, like just get the money set aside. Do it in cash for 2 years and then go find an advisor. They'd be happy to meet you. But it has to be based upon those principles with small bits of consistent action over long periods of time. And the inoculation is not permanent once it's there. You can so easily drift back. My wife and I have enjoyed, by default, living so deeply within our means, we haven't had to even look at a budget in 2 years. And we've recently said, you know, we're going to get back to the practice just because it's good practice.
Well, let's turn a little bit. Man, time always flies so much. We've kind of mentioned that we both work with a company called Dimensional Fund Advisors.
Mm-hmm.
And it was probably 15 years ago that I was at a coffee shop with another advisor as I was trying to figure out how to do this whole independent thing. And he says, well, I work with Dimensional Fund Advisors, and I didn't even know about it. How is that? I mean, it's like a mindset, and we call it evidence-based investing.
Mm-hmm.
How is that different? What would you say? How is that approach different from traditional financial advice that someone who's just doing mutual funds?
Yeah.
What would you say is
so I'll give maybe just a quick bullet list of some differences. So Dimensional Fund Advisors, if you're listening, is probably the largest asset management firm you've never heard of. And the reason you've never heard of them is they don't advertise. They were the inceptor of one of the very first index funds, the founders of Dimensional. And what they took the slant of, while other companies like Oppenheimer, Putnam, were building large field forces of wholesalers to go out and tell the story and invite advisors to breakfast and lunch and dinner. And if you guys want more on that story, on More Than Commas, I've got a whole talk I give called The Illusions of Investing that talks about what an advisor goes through. And you don't find dimensional funds because they don't do that kind of advertising unless you start reading the academic journals on investing. And those academic journals on investing really discourage people from stock picking and market timing, et cetera, because it just doesn't work. And it's fundamentally speculation the asset manager is doing with our money. So what we decided to do by using Dimensional is they kind of just look at it as we own everything that has a pretty good chance of doing what the market's going to do. Right. The stuff that's real bad, we don't own, but we own pretty much everything else. So the way we put it is
Harry Markowitz, who died, I don't know, he's a few years ago, but he was doing his calculations on a yellow pad in the 1950s.
Yes.
But the thing that I remember Harry Markowitz saying long ago was Harry Markowitz said, just buy the market.
Yep.
It's like, well, I don't know how, so it's like the average person could never do that. But yeah, it's true.
Now we pretty well can. And now we do, I tell clients all the time, let's say you're back in the 1990s and you're like, do I buy Walmart or Kmart? They're very close companies at that time. Well, some asset managers say, I'm picking Kmart because I'm going to bet on them. But our type of asset management is like, we'd look and it would be, both of them have positive attributes for the future. Both of them might work out. Well, guess what? When nobody goes to Kmart anymore because they're closed, where do they go? Walmart, which means our portfolio is still getting the revenue, the profitability, and the accompanying enterprise value because the consumers are going to spend money anyway. So all we have to do is be everywhere in the market. And like our portfolios have about 14,000 different positions because we're not market timing. We're just scientifically holding and rebalancing a portfolio. It's wildly deep, but unexciting. And we just coach our clients with the science over and over again to hold strategy.
Yeah. Hold strategy. Don't break strategy.
Don't break strategy.
Those are things. Hopefully people can remember that. Paul, we're running out of time. I want to hear a little bit about the More Than Commas.
Yeah. More Than Commas podcast.
What is that? What does that mean? Where did that come from? And, the whole idea that wealth has to mean more than numbers.
Yeah. Well, you think about it, most people in life, when it comes to getting retirement, is they gotta get above 2 commas, and then the billionaires talking about getting to 3 commas. But the thing is that what's going to have us really enjoy life and our independence and our time in our old age is going to be more than just the commas in our portfolio. And so that just gave, by changing our podcast name, it really gave us more latitude. We're now over 300 episodes. We've been on air since 2016. People can go way, way back in our stuff. But the rebranding of it just gave us more license to, the other day I recorded one in my shop that's just the first 72-hour preparedness at a home in case of an emergency. It was right after those big blackouts in Spain.
Right.
So yeah, we'd love to have anybody who's a subscriber. We're fun. We answer all the comments. And we love hearing suggestions. We get a lot more downloads on podcasts than we do YouTube, but I don't know. I like having my face seen sometimes.
Well, I was going to tell you that, 10 years, 20 years from now, you can apply for a job as Santa Claus.
Yeah, I'm working on it. Well, the beautiful thing is my wife loves it. She says, keep growing it, and I'll just keep letting it get a little longer. But while keeping it groomed, and then one day my wife is going to say, that's it. And that's when I'll stop, because as far as how I dress or how I look, there's only one customer anymore, and that's my wife.
Yeah, that's right. Well, how would you sum this whole thing up? Because we've got a couple of minutes here. So we need to, what are your parting thoughts?
Parting words would be, if you want to be better with money, start talking about money. And if you want to be more effective with money, have more effective conversations with money and control the narrative. Set a strategy for yourself. And then when things risk you coming off strategy, talk with your spouse. Maybe it's okay to deviate, but set a strategy first. We're going to save X. We're going to give X to the church. We're going to spend this much on recreation. Just set a plan and then get the money tucked aside. And you don't even need to go talk to an advisor right now. There's probably advisors love to hear from you. But this month, you can intentionally say, we're going to set aside X and then do that and feel that win. And then do that again next month and next month. And if you have more effective conversations with money, you're more than likely not only going to be better for you and your family, but probably those closest to you are going to increase their financial competence as well. And actually give you all a chance to live in financial independence together. Because if you don't talk to the people in your community about money, then you're going to successfully step off into old age, and they're not going to be able to join you, and they're not going to understand how you were able to do it and why you didn't introduce them to your advisor. And that's going to be a tough conversation. So I encourage people to talk about money as much as you can, to the people that you love the most.
Good advice. And you're a good man, and you've got a very, very important, you have lucky clients who are there with you, having you guide them.
Well, thank you very much.
I want to thank you for being with us today.
Yeah, I was so glad to be here. This is such an
important thing for everybody needs to really take this to heart.
Yep. And all they got to do is take a little more to heart every day. You don't need to be perfect today. Just make a little progress financially today. And just like compounding returns, your habits will compound too.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, with that, I think we've asked some pretty good questions today. And I want to thank you again for joining us. And thanks for joining us on our podcast.
So glad. I'm so glad I could be here. And thank you so much for the chance to have a chat with your audience.
All right. Okay. Thanks for...
Today's episode is over, but we did ask good questions again, didn't we? Don't miss out as we broadcast live every Wednesday, 6 p.m. Eastern Time on W4CY Radio at W4CY.com. Join Bonita Bell-Andersen next week for more conversations with experts on finances, retirement, behavioral finance issues, health and wellness, and more. Until then, remember to ask good questions.